So my name is Rob Baker, and I'm the founder of Tailored Thinking. So Tailored Thinking are a positive psychology, wellbeing, and HR consultancy, and we were named CIPD's HR Consultancy of the Year last year, which was amazing. It was like, for such a small kind of new business, it was really exciting for us to be named. And there's only 2 or 3 people at the moment within the business and some associates, so very small. But one of the projects that we were awarded for in terms of our submission was a number of projects related to job crafting. And so what I'm excited about in terms of the award, not only just the accolade of it, which feels kind of cool for the ego, but also is in terms of from the CIPD and other professional bodies recognizing job crafting as an area of interest and value for the business. And I think that's shifting and changing, and I'm hoping that, I know some of you know job crafting, but I'm hoping that we can all be advocates and allies in terms of trying to spread the word about the power that this job crafting has. So in terms of the time that we have together, I'm just going to look at my watch. We've got about 15 minutes together. We'll finish on time. I promised Hannah that in terms of breathing space, and I will have a bit of time to go to a networking room after this. So I'm going to say it now, and we'll remind it later, that I'll pop into networking room 8 immediately after this session, if people want to follow up on anything specifically. We'll hopefully have some time in the session as well today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some ideas about job crafting, but I know that most of you will know what job crafting is, so I've got to recognize that. But I'm going to present it in a way that I always present it to organizations, to give you a sense of, if you were to want to encourage organizations to consider job crafting, how I go about doing this. So I'm going to share that with you. And I'm just doing that because I've struggled to think about how I get people to buy into and be interested in job crafting. And then I'm going to share with you an activity that I do with kind of the workshops, at least one activity, and then we can talk through some case studies, or we can have questions, and we can go where we want to from that perspective. But I want to give you some tools and some ideas that you can kind of practically go away and explore. That's my aim for today's session. And Hannah has said very kindly that she's going to keep an eye on the chat, so you're more than welcome to heckle me in any way you want to in today's session. So you can come off mic and ask questions. You can if you put your hand up and wave, I try and spot you if I can see you on screen at the moment, or put something in the chat, and we'll get to questions at some point, because again, this is going to be an interactive session rather than a pre-recorded one. I think pre-recorded sessions have a real value, but I personally wanted to have the opportunity to speak to you all. So thank you for coming along. So anything, Hannah, anything that I've missed that I need to say before I
Nothing that we've really missed. I mean, we covered the basic housekeeping, which is, do feel free to come on mic or video. And Rob, I like the way you said it. I honestly can't remember the phrase that you used now, but it's not an obligation, but it's
an invitation. An invitation is always an invitation. Yeah.
Perfect. So do feel free to crack on when you're ready
to do that. Brilliant. Okay, so let's start with some slides, and so I'm going to share these with you.
While Rob's getting the slides up, what we can do for the slide deck is, if you hover over it, you can see the 3 dots in the right hand corner. Once the slides are up, if you click that and click pin, the slides will appear bigger, because what we don't want is everyone like squinting or hurting their eyes.
So is this, are they not big at the moment?
So it's not something that you're able to do, Rob. It's something that
other people can do.
Need to be doing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Will we have access to these slides, or will they be sent through afterwards as well, Hannah?
It'll be available in the member area on the ADP website.
So yeah, you're more than welcome to look at these slides afterwards. And I've put in here, and I know the audience, so the references for this, if you want to kind of dive into this further, I've put some resources together for you as well to follow up on what we said, and some videos and some other aspects. And I've put my contact details in there, and it's genuine. Again, the invitation is genuine one. If you're interested in job crafting, I like chatting to people who are into this space. It's my area that I'm deeply passionate about. And if I can do anything to help any of you to kind of explore this area further, then please don't hesitate to drop me a line. The other thing to mention in terms of these slides is that they're kind of informed by my research and work in this area, and I did my best attempt to synthesize 2 years ago all the research and all the kind of practical approaches to job crafting into a book, and personalization at work. which came out last March, and you don't need to read the book or buy the book. I'm giving you the best stuff today, so don't worry about it. But if you wanted to if you're interested in this and you want to get into a much deeper level, then that will be a good destination point for you. And I've always mentioned that Taylor Thinking is the kind of consultancy that I founded. You've got my details here. So this is, and we can do this. We can do this now. I won't do this live now because of the screen things. But if you were to find Google, and you were to type "my job is," you'll find that Google has predictive text, and it will kind of give you some free answers. And these are the things that I think I did this a couple of days ago. This is the results from that. So if you look at Google at the moment, it's saying my job is making me ill, so boring, making me depressed, is killing me. Not great reading. And I think all of us are kind of who are interested in looking at probably engagement, looking at well-being, looking at performance, will know that often when we survey employees, particularly from a kind of worldwide surveys, they're showing that there's a disconnect between individuals being fully engaged in their work and the work that they do. And Google is showing kind of a particularly negative aspect of that. But I think most organizations that I speak to at least will recognize that not everyone in their organization is energized as they'd like to be. And part of the reason for this, and I'll kind of explore this later, is the fact that we don't in the workplace at the moment. One of the reasons I believe this is when people aren't fully engaged is that we're not able to personalize our work in the way that we can all other aspects of our life. So this is an experience now. If you wanted to kind of buy a car for BMW, but other brands of cars do this as well, you can pretty much personalize any and every aspect of your car. We can personalize our cars, our coffee cups, our holidays, you name it, we can personalize it. And we do this because we recognize the value and benefit of this personalization. We tend to value the things more that we personalize. And yet when it comes to work, we still often don't have this opportunity to personalize what we do. This is another example of personalization that's coming to us soon. This is a ZZ suit. I'm not going to do the twist now for you, but this is a suit that you can order, kind of scan you on your mobile phone, do a 360 pirouette, and you can then get customized clothing sent to you. And we know that Google, Amazon have a patent for something very similar. So this is coming to us. It's just not here quite yet, or it's at the very early stages. So we can personalize any and every aspect of our lives, but yet we can't personalize our work. So I'm going to talk to you about why we should personalize work, what kind of understanding how I share job crafting with other groups. We'll talk about a case study of Connect Health, which I think may be interested in terms of bringing job crafting to life within organizations, and we'll pick questions. We'll have questions as we're going along as well. So I'm going to take you to IKEA first of all in this presentation, and some of you will be kind of the idea of going to IKEA will kind of fill you with joy. Some of you potentially fill you with dread in terms of panic attacks about going to IKEA. So forgive me, I don't want to trigger any panic attacks. But there's a really nice study that Dan Malcolm did with colleagues. Again, it's in the notes from Harvard Business School, and they got participants into two different groups. Group one, they asked them to come into a room, and the box that you can see in front of the stationery box had been pre-made for them. So they got to inspect the box, and they were said, how much do you value this box? How much do you think it's worth? The second group, which we'll call the builders, they actually were presented with a flat pack box. Some of you may have these in your houses, may have had to do this, and they asked them to build the box. It took them about 4 or 5 minutes, and then to inspect the finished outcome and to say, how much do you think this is worth? And there was a difference between the two different groups in terms of how much they valued it. So I'm going to ask you to put on chat, just put who do you think valued it most? Was it the inspectors, the people who came in who didn't have to do the work in terms of building the boxes because it was already made for them? So that was put an eye, or was it the builders, the people who actually had to go through the work of building the box and then were putting a dollar bill value on it? What do people think? So Ali started us off. Ali, thanks for starting us with builders. Tulasi, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, Tulasi, but thanks, builders, and Juliet, builders, Nikki, builders. Are we going to have anyone for the other camp for inspectors? And I appreciate some of you are here but not able to put comments in. Okay, so mainly for builders. Would someone come off mic and just let me know why they've put builders? So would someone just volunteer why they've put builders? Thanks, Ali.
I think that I would, just from my personal perspective, I something that I've been more involved in and been able to take part in, I think I value more than just something that's just put in front of me.
Yeah, and does that resonate with other people? Just thinking nods of heads in terms of some of those. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. So when people feel that there's part of them in what they're doing is the final outcome, they tend to value the element more, and the builders in this instance have valued it. So it's Mike Norton and Dan Mogchon, I think it is, and Dan Ariely did the study, and they found that the builders have valued the items actually twice as much as the inspectors. And I think it's very much for the reason you mentioned, in terms of the people feel that when there's part of them in terms of the outcome, they tend to value it more, which will explain why some of us may have got DIY projects or clothing items or things that maybe aren't an external person will see, but they don't necessarily value it as much as you do. And I think when I found this, not only does it link to job crafting, we'll talk about this in a second, but it also links to organizational behavior, and the fact that I think often in organizations with the best of intentions, we build boxes for other people in terms of the decisions we make, in terms of how we communicate things. It's like, here's a nice box, we've made the decision for you, you don't have to think about it, just get on and do it. And yet the cost of that is that people feeling some of their energy, their input, their engagement in that decision or that process or that communication isn't as strong as it could be if they felt that there's some involvement in the process. Now, we're not expecting we can't involve everyone all the time in everything, but I think we often think we're doing people a favor by building boxes for people, because it makes sense. You're not having to go through that effort, but actually there's a cost involved in doing that. So I'm going to just talk about kind of how we can bring this personalized approach to work, and it is through job crafting. And so, as many of you will know, it's a process and approach that encourages people to tap into their diverse, the whole, and their best selves. It's a way of encouraging people to customize and tailor their work. And again, this is something that I do when I'm talking to organizations. I often explain this by sharing a picture of that I took in Newcastle of a semi-tailored jacket. So I nearly got thrown out by the security guard when I took this picture. Luckily, I managed to take it before they threw me out. And this was advertising the fact that this jacket could be tailored to meet your individual dimensions. So they could take it in a little bit and narrow the sleeves to make it a better, more comfortable fit for you as an individual. But what you couldn't do is you couldn't change the fabric of the jacket, you couldn't change the style of the jacket, you couldn't change the kind of color of the jacket. That was fixed, but you could make the jacket itself a better fit for you. And the way that I describe job crafting is the same. So it's not about radically redesigning your job. It's not about tearing up your job descriptions, although that would be fun, right? To be setting fire to these things. And you wouldn't probably have job descriptions these days. You'd have to kind of press Control-Alt-Delete on it or something, which wouldn't be satisfying. But you don't get to tear up or rip up your job descriptions. What you are doing is getting your existing job and finding small and subtle and positive ways to make it a better fit for you as an individual. And we'll come on to kind of how to deal with challenges or concerns about job crafting. So number one point that when I'm sharing job crafting is it's not to leaders and to managers, not about asking everyone to be mavericks and just do things in completely different ways. It's around finding positive changes that we can all make to make your existing job a bit better. So it's not around changing things dynamically. And some of you will know, again, some of you done the research on this will know this, but the first studies around job crafting was developed in 2001 by Amy Straczynski and Jane Dutton. I was really lucky to have spoken to them on a number of occasions, and Jane Dutton wrote the foreword for my book, which was just mind-blowing. It was awesome. And interestingly, when I spoke to Amy Wisniewski, she mentioned that actually she thought initially they were going to call job crafting job architecture, which I don't think is as catching, maybe wouldn't have caught on as much within academic circles if she hadn't called it job crafting. And so this original study was looking at hospital cleaners. So they were looking at engagement scores, actually, was the purpose of their study. And they found they were looking at engagement scores across the whole of the university and the hospital. as well. And they found that in certain professions there was big schisms in terms of engagement scores. So some people were in, say, in cleaners, some people valued their job very highly and some people valued their job very lowly, from an engagement perspective. And they're really curious about why this was. And so they interviewed the people, and they found that some people described their jobs as very low status and very menial, and with low power and low kind of value. No guessing where they were from a values perspective, right? And there were those that saw their job as actually kind of creating a sterile, clean environment from which patients can recover and recuperate. And they tended to people who saw their job in those kind of ways, or saw them as a way of connecting with patients on a day-to-day basis or family members, they rated their job as more engaging. But interestingly as well, it came out from these interviews that the people who saw their job in this way, who are more engaged, also tended to find small ways to personalize how they did their job to reflect how they saw their job. So one cleaner described moving around pitches on the corridors when they were cleaning them to make a more stimulating environment, so it wasn't the same every day. Some cleaners saying every day they looked out for a patient that looked upset so they could smile with them and make a connection. Others said they were always looking out for family members who looked lost on the wards because they're really difficult to navigate, and they would direct them back to where they needed to be. And every day they did this. These were kind of things that took 5-10 minutes a day. It wasn't fundamentally change the job, but it was finding opportunities for them to act in a way that reflected how they saw their job as being someone who's making a difference to other people through the work that they did. And so they call this concept job crafting. I say nearly was called job architecture. And then since then, this area has been kind of researched, and we're up to 150 peer-reviewed academic papers on job crafting now. And I think I looked at 120 or something when I was looking at my book. So there's a really strong evidence base here from which to think about in terms of job crafting, which Amy Wojcinski and Jane Dutton have given us. And I still believe that understanding kind of where it's come from, its origins, can be helpful. And there's a video of Amy talking that, again, I've put in the references that some of you may have seen, which is by Rework. If you Google the talk, it's about 10 to 12 minutes of Amy talking about her origins. I think it's really worth looking at. And again, it's something I often play to audiences if I'm talking to them about job crafting. One thing that I think is important to recognize, and something that I've kind of come to see myself more recently, is that I think there's a difference between just being proactive and job crafting. So if you think about seeing two joggers on the street, you might see them, they go past you and they're both looking exactly the same, they're running at the same pace, wearing the same clothes even, and they run past them. One of those people running may be just running because they enjoy running and they're just doing it because that's what they do and it's something they always do. So there's no real purpose to their running. They're active, they're running, they're going through, they're running past you. The next runner you see actually may still be running and getting all the benefits from the exercise they're doing, but they may have an additional purpose to what they're doing, because it may be doing Couch to 5K, it may be deliberately because they know that it gives them an opportunity to refresh and re-energize when they go running. It may be that they are trying to lose weight, but there's an additional purpose to that activity that they're doing. And I see the same with work. So being proactive is around finding ways to improve and change your job, and some people just naturally do this. But job crafting is the act of doing that proactivity, but doing it deliberately, making a positive change deliberately in a way that actually will make your job better based on your individual circumstances at one time. So it's job crafting is being proactive and being deliberate, is the way that I describe it to organizations. And it comes in lots of different shapes and sizes. So the areas that I tend to focus on and encourage organizations to focus on is around small changes, so things that are 5 to 10 minutes a day. Because this seeds job crafting. When you encourage people to make small changes at 5-10 minutes a day or an hour a week, in total, they're more likely to do it. They're more likely to approach it playfully. But job crafting can lead to bigger changes. People have changed their careers, but I find that they're less common than the micro job crafting ones. And often when I talk to people about, from a job crafting perspective, people are concerned a little bit. Employees are excited by the idea that this may lead to positive career progression for them, but the employer is concerned that this might lead to people kind of moving on and churn and movement. So that's just to mention that to you. And when I did some study research with the University of Melbourne, Dr. Gavin Slemp into job crafting activity. We sampled job crafting behaviours and we looked at what people did. We found that the majority of people in their job craft actually did something that took, I think, less than 50 minutes a day was our estimate in terms of the timing. So most people who feel that job crafting, they do it in relatively small time chunks.
Sorry, Rob, was that 50 or 15?
15, 1-5, so small stuff. So I can, my shorthand for this is 5 to 10 minutes a day or an hour a week is kind of like a budget that kind of in terms of encouraging people to think of in terms of job crafting. So it's not fundamentally changing the footprint of the job. Thanks for checking on that. So we're going to now kind of do an exercise to think about stimulating job crafting before we jump back into talking about job crafting itself. And this is called a love and loathe activity. And I'm going to share with you a link in a second on the... Actually, before I send you a link, I'm going to share with you my screen so that you can see this activity. And again, some of you, if you're multitasking at the moment doing some work, this might be a good, like if you want a 3-minute entertainment break and do something different, this might be a fun activity to do, but don't worry about it. If not, you can use that, follow the links for this separately. So this is using a whiteboard, and this is a mirror board. You can use Mural and other activities. And I started using whiteboards during the pandemic or just before them, and I use them all the time. Now, even now, when I've had the opportunities to work in groups, I get people to do virtual whiteboard stuff because it's just easier, more entertaining, and it's easier to kind of code afterwards. So one activity I get people, because often people get stuck about how they can job craft, what can they do? So one activity I get people to do is think about what tasks and activities they do and what are the things that give them energy and what are the things that drain them energy. And you can do this as individually, or we can do this as a group. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and if you can just look at my screen now or look at the screen and focus on this, I'm going to click a post-it note. So if you see on the left-hand side, it says sticky notes. And I'm going to create one and pick a color, go for red today. And I'm going to think about, okay, what's something that drains me of energy, and I'm going to ask you to pick 2 things. What's something that gives you energy and drains you of energy? So for me, doing my expenses is something that I always dread. I've crafted it, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but it's something that I don't spend a lot of time doing it. So it's relatively down here, but it drains me of energy. And something that I love doing, so again, I'm going to put something here, is around reading and research. So I could do this all day in terms of reading and research. It's something that gives me energy, but I don't have the remit to do lots of that in my work kind of currently. So I find time to do more of it, but I put it there. So I'm going to share this link with you now, and I'm going to invite you all to just put on, you can go put as many as you want to, but at least 2 would be great, of something that gives you energy and something that takes energy away from you. So you should see this now in the... And Hannah, I've just seen your other point around your thoughts about the building and the autonomy, taking autonomy around. Yeah, I think absolutely. And I could show you another slide in terms of from an autonomy perspective in job crafting, is that the building blocks, I think, for people performing at the best and being motivated, so it's, it comes from self-determination theory, which is around people having autonomy, about people being able to use their competencies or their strengths, and also being able to do it connected to other people. And so job crafting encourages all those behaviors to find them from themselves from a bottom-up perspective rather than the top-down one. So it's a really interesting point, really good observation. So I'm cool. I can get to see this kind of evolving live now, this activity. So I appreciate there might be some irony of someone saying reading and replying to emails. Someone might be doing this in this session at this moment in time. So hopefully I'm giving you energy as well as you having some taking away. So admin, reading, report, yeah, all these things. Facilitating subjects on things you love. Yeah, I can totally agree with that. So I'm going to keep playing on this, and I'm going to stop showing the screen now for you and go back to the slides. And my nod's heading, my head is nodding with a lot of those different activities. So what I tend to get people to do this as a thing individually, or you can do it as a team. It's really interesting to do it as a team, because some people are like, oh, Hannah, you like doing presenting material for slides and for material. I hate doing that. I love presenting, but I hate doing the thing behind it. And sometimes you never know this, and because you never had the conversation, and it gives you the opportunity to potentially maybe dial up or dial down certain activities within your team. So it's a really good activity for that.
I think that's an amazing point that you've just made there. And I'm going to bait myself out, because on the board, I quite like creating like the big vision, etc. But what drains my energy is potentially like the admin and the detail, etc. So I always pair myself up with someone who likes doing that sort of thing.
Awesome. That's really super smart way of doing that. I think it's something that we don't do enough deliberately. So I think that's super smart.
Oh, Ali's just popped in the chat that she couldn't get it to work on
oh no,
Mac. So Ali, did you want to say it?
Yeah,
if that's all right.
Yeah,
only if you want to share.
Yeah, basically that's what drained me when I'm trying to do something and I can't get it to work.
Oh no, we drained your energy today.
We'll have to bolster you back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to bolster you. So thank you for that. So I'm sorry you can't. If the slides, you can got blank ones, you can just have a go. You can put on a piece of paper. You don't have to do it interactive in an interactive way, but it's most people get access to this sort of way. So forgive me, Ali, that it doesn't work for you. And what I encourage people to do.
Oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt. I was going to say it might be because people are working off their work laptops. Companies might block it.
Yeah.
But sorry, back to you.
No, it's no problem. No, you're absolutely right. So I'd always check that if you're using this. Something that I definitely always do to make sure people can access stuff. And then what I do generally, if I'm saying right now we're going to stimulate some job crafting, I think about how this might feed into job crafting. You think about, well, what are the things that drain you of energy? Can you change this slightly in some way in terms of actually the physical task that you do? Thinking about the purpose of it, or maybe in terms of how you work with other people on that task. Or is there a way of kind of changing this so it gives you energy? So actually, is there a way of boosting something that you don't do a lot of that you want to do more of? So in my example of expenses and admin, I'll give you another example. I'm just boring myself because I gave that yesterday. So an example that I find difficult is around networking. So something that the idea of sales is something that just drains me of any energy completely. So when I was starting the business, someone said you need to make kind of connections. I was based in the Northeast, and I was didn't know anyone, so it was just starting from scratch. And so rather than thinking about pitching to organizations or contacting organizations and having kind of cool kind of conversations that just drain me of energy, I thought about how I can reframe this or recraft it in my head. So something I call purpose crafting or cognitive crafting. And I reframed it as having 100 conversations about work with different organizations. So I could talk about work all day. As I said, I'm an out and out geek when it comes to kind of organizations and thriving and teams and individuals and organizations. So I can do that, but in my head, and rather than approaching these conversations as a sales opportunity or networking opportunity that I was doing just for the business, it was purely an opportunity to have a conversation. And I found much more comfortable with those. I had much more free flowing conversations, and it was just how I kind of thought about this in my head. But it made a real difference to me in terms of the business. So you may be changing the tasks. So maybe actually, if there's an admin task, saying, can you make that task better? Can you get someone else to do it? Or it may be that you need to think about changing how you think about it. And there may be, in terms of boosting, there might be opportunities for you to boost your energy. So do something in a way, do more of something that gives you energy. And again, Nikki, we talked about well-being. Again, this is really important from a well-being perspective, because if you've got loads of stuff that drain you of energy that are kind of coming up with that thing, it gives you the opportunity to understand that a little bit in terms of why your energy levels might be lower, because actually you've got loads of stuff that you're feeling is just taking away. And then it's around, can you reframe those? Can you change them? Can you do that differently? Or is there a way of fostering energy? So this activity helps from the well-being perspective as well. And Juliet, I'm glad I've got someone else who doesn't love sales as well. So a kindred spirit. Thank you for that. So I'm going to share with you. I'll share a quick video about which I share with people about job crafting. So I'm going to do that now because it's only a couple of minutes, so it's fun. And then we'll pause for some questions, and then I'll talk about some other bits. So this is a video from David Holmes from Southwest Airlines. So I'm hoping you can all hear this.
Board Southwest Airlines Flight 372, service to Oklahoma City.
When David Holmes used to give the pre-flight instructions, the passengers would tune out and glaze over. Not anymore.
I'm going to shake things up a little bit. I take them by surprise. I usually don't tell them that I'm going to do it.
And to do it,
You guys with me? All right. So give me a stomp, clap, clap.
David needs a little audience participation to pull it off.
There you go. Keep that going. This is Flight 372 on SWA. The flight attendants on board serving you today. Teresa in the middle, David in the back. My name is David, and I'm here to tell you that. The first time I did it, it's really just because it's just some fun thing to do. If you have a seat on the road with the exit, we're going to talk to you, so you might as well expect it. You got to help evacuate in case we need you. If you don't want to, then we're going to reseat you. And I didn't know how they were going to react, but I was in a good mood, and I like to have fun at work. But then people started getting off the plane telling me, that's the first time I ever listened to the emergency instructions. Before we leave, our advice is put away your electronic devices. Fasten your seatbelt, then put your trays up. Press the button to make the seat back raise up.
David was discovered by a passenger who recorded his rap on her cell phone and said she was going to put it on YouTube.
And I said, I dare you. And 2 days later, she did it. And 2 days after that, it was already over 2,000 hits at the time.
Now David is a YouTube sensation, and he's been doing the rap ever since, to rave reviews.
Sit back, relax, have a good time.
Never experienced a rap in flight attendant. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty easy. And I don't like rap, and I really like that. That was pretty good.
Thank you for the fact that I wasn't ignored. This is Southwest Airlines. Welcome aboard.
Okay. So I'm not going to ask any of you to rap, or Hannah to rap the end of the closing bit of this, although I might do. No, I'm not. I might, Hannah, I promise. And the reason I share this is because it's fun. It always makes me smile. I've seen it hundreds of times now, but it nicely encapsulates some of the kind of key elements of job crafting. So when you look at job crafting, certainly from an organizational perspective, I see there's four kind of elements that come out from when you look at job crafting practice. Number one, it's personal. It has to come from the individual. You couldn't do a rap, or I assume most of you wouldn't be rapping into your job, wouldn't be the number one thing to do, but you might have other strengths that are personal to you that you want to bring out in the work that you do. And David was saying this is something he was passionate about, so it very much came from him. Second is that job crafting, I think it really helps to think about it as being experimental. So it's not something you're forcing someone to do. It's something that should be playful. You don't know what's going to happen as a consequence of this. So you should always have an open mind in terms of job crafting. So in David's example, there was like, well, I just tried it one day. I didn't know what was going to happen. So I was bored, or I think is what he said, or wanted to try something new. So that was it. It was very much an experimental aspect. And the third element is that it's small. So again, most people, when you see job crafting, I've mentioned that it's 10 to 15 minutes a day that people tend to do it. In David's instance here, he would have done the flight announcement anyway. You might have even done it slightly quicker in his rap. So it's around maybe changing your job subtly and in small ways. It's not changing fundamentally the fabric of the job. And then lastly, and I think this is really important, is that it leads to unexpected outcomes. So when you make a change, you don't know quite what's going to happen. So in David's instance, he did it because he wanted to have some fun in his work, he said, but the unexpected outcome is that people actually listened to what he was saying. Shock horror in terms of the announcement. And I find that when you make changes in terms of what you're doing, job crafting, it can lead to unexpected outcomes. So an example recently that someone had within this was someone was saying, actually, what I want to do from a wellbeing perspective was to get more steps. And so they wanted to have an opportunity to get outside during the day. And they'd previously gone for walking meetings with their colleagues around the block, around their workplaces. And during the pandemic and working from home in a more hybrid ways, what they decided to do is they still wanted to get the steps in, but they decided to put their earbuds in or the earphones in and go for a walk around their own housing blocks at the same time and still have that conversation. So the purpose of it, the reason they're doing it is because they wanted to get fitter. So it's from a well-being crafting perspective, maybe, that you can think about this. That was their perspective. But actually what they found was that they had more energy in terms of their work. They had better conversations with their colleagues. They were more playful. They were kind of a deeper conversation. So that was the unexpected outcome from that job crafting experiment. And I often find it's really helpful to be open-minded about what the outcomes are going to be. when it comes to job crafting, and again, this is from when I did for the book, was around I really wanted to kind of understand the model of job crafting in terms of explaining it to myself to start with, and then trying to explain it to other people. And so the heart of this is the why. The why does job crafting matter? Why should you care about it? And it's linked to thriving, it's linked to growth, and it's linked to performance in a variety of different contexts as well. So again, people are interested in this from maybe neurodiversity perspective. So this would relate as much to anyone who's neurodiverse as it would be to anyone else with different ethnicities or genders in the workplace. So it's linked to thriving, so that's kind of linked to well-being, it's linked to performance, and it's linked to career growth and progression. So people who tend to job craft tend to be more satisfied in their jobs, but they also tend to over time go have more kind of upward mobility or sideways mobility, but just feel like their job's changing or metamorphosizing, to steal I think Ali's point early on today. And the next level of this is the what of job crafting. And so there's lots of different types of job crafting that have been identified. I tend to talk about 5 that I kind of see encourage people to look at. So one's looking at the tasks, so actually changing to people's tasks and activities. And the second is around skills. So this is around developing new skills and refining and deepening existing skills. The third element relates to purpose. So this is around connecting to the purpose of the work that people do and understanding kind of why it is that they do what they're doing. And often you can get this from feedback from organizations, where you're getting kind of creating opportunities for people to get better feedback and understanding and seeing the impact of the work they're doing. The fourth element is relationships. This is around actually how we can amplify and improve our existing relationships, maybe dial down the relationships with people who we find mood hoovers, or people who we have maybe more disruptive relationships with, or reframe how we think about those interactions, but trying to improve those relationships. And that could be with co-workers, it could be with customers, it could be with any human being effectively. And then lastly, well-being crafting. So this is around making your job healthier from a mental or physical perspective. And that could relate to kind of exercise, again, steps. It could be taking breaks. It could be around some individuals recently were doing some exercises, and they were focusing on how they can transition at the end of the day to turn off, because they kept thinking about work and checking emails, and in the evening they didn't want to, or thinking about work. And so they introduced a kind of home commute, a false commute that they did from a well-being perspective to encourage them to switch off at the end of the day. So it'll be different for everyone. And I often encourage people to think about, if you're going to make a change, choose one element to make a change on. You might have lots of ideas about how you can improve your job, but pick one and be deliberate. And then the how of job crafting is creating the space for people to reflect on who they do, who they're working with, what they do, when they do it, why they do it, where they work, and how well they do it. And often it's through sessions that either workshops that we encourage people to reflect on those different elements and questions. And I've shared with you one activity that I find useful to encourage people to do that. I'm going to skip, you can see the skips as we're going through, rather than give you examples of all the different elements of job crafting. I'm going to skip just to briefly talk to you about Connect Health, because I think it's interesting. And this was an organization that was interested in job crafting, and they really wanted to bring it to life. So what we did with Connect Health, and their musculoskeletal physiotherapy organization, is we introduced job crafting as part of their performance reviews and discussions. So they once a quarter they had a conversation with their manager about how they can improve their jobs with a different job crafting focus. So in this quarter, it relates to tasks. The questions were, what are the things that give you energy? How do you feel your personal strengths are being related? What do you think your future career work aspirations are? But it very much was focused on the tasks. The next was around next quarter. So 4 months later was around, or 3 months later was around skills and well-being. You get the picture. But it was a really positive way of ensuring that everyone had a high quality conversation with their managers using a framework that I developed with them to encourage these types of conversations. And I'm just sharing that because I thought it's you often see organizations struggle to make a difference with or bring these things to life, and actually embedding this in their kind of these conversations as part of their performance discussions was a really smart way of doing this, and it had some really massive impacts. So in terms of leading to kind of turnover savings, the thing I was most proud of in terms of this was around Connect Health, was a disconnect between them caring about physios. The feeling people didn't care about them, and 24% of people had as a result of the post measures looked at supporting my kind of career aspirations. 24%. Also, during the time that we did the study, there was a 4,900 days reduction in sickness absence. Now, we can't say this is all down to job crafting, but what we can say is that these are all the measurements that we took pre, and because we thought job crafting would have an impact on them, and we measured them post as well. So I'm really proud of those different measures, and I think encouraging people to personalize their work can be really, really positive and impactful. And I'll just leave you one other activity for the questions that you can use, and this is around thinking about, again, encouraging reflection. So what often I do is just get people to think about, in terms of your current job, and I do this on using mirror boards sometimes as well, is saying what are things you'd like to add to, grow, or promote? What are things you'd like to take away, reduce, or prevent? What are things you could change, improve, and adapt? What would you keep, maintain, and persist with? What are things you're kind of working really well, you want to continue, and what are things you'd like to stop and pause with this? And that can elicit some really rich thinking on some really simple questions, and you'll know this from your own work, that simple questions can lead to really powerful reflections and insights. And so it's another activity that I do with the group. And for my kind of takeaways, that kind of work should come in any color. So I'll stop for questions and just put auto flag at the end of this for slides. There is a TED talk that I did, again, trying to do my best to kind of capture job crafting, what I thought matters in 10 minutes, that I've linked to. And there's a guide for job crafting that we just updated in March this year that has more resources, that's more kind of stories that you might find useful to, if you're using, exploring this yourself with your organization or as a consultant. Again, please feel used to steal and adapt as appropriate. Thank you. So I'm going to stop now and I see if we've got questions for questions that come in, and come off, and for questions you can come off mic or put them in the chat. And I can go back to some other things if you want me to as well. So if people want me to go back on some of the things that you saw me skip a little bit, then happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a question in the chat for a while. We've had a very engaging conversation, either agreeing with what you're saying or elaborating on points.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really enjoying it. I'm just seeing Maggie as well coming in. So hi, Maggie. So there's a question from Nikki. So I'll read this out. So to Lisa, so you can't unmute myself. Dr. White, you've got a question as well. So you've just said, are there any roles or particular contexts you've come across where it's more challenging with job crafting? This is a really interesting question, and I feel my answer kind of is weak, because what I'm saying is I haven't yet, and I feel because of that I should have a stronger answer in terms of saying it doesn't apply to certain contexts. But I have applied it to cleaners, I have applied it to contact centers, I have applied this into areas where I didn't know if it was necessary, crafting was necessarily going to work. What I have found is that if you set people up and they give them permission, and the thing that's critical is that they have the permission and the encouragement from their managers, and that's the critical aspect. But if you have the permission and the encouragement from managers to think about making improvements to their job, everyone is thirsty, everyone's got ideas, everyone can find ways to do it. So I'll give you an example on the contact center. Someone said one of the things that was important to them was tidying up notes, being kind of clear, and they knew that they couldn't tidy up all the notes and all the files all the time, but they gave themselves 5 minutes once a day when they had a note to kind of tidy it up. And every time they did it, they felt that they were feeling better because they were a tidy person, they wanted clear notes. Their colleagues benefited from it, and their customers benefited from that too. So it was just an example there of how a customer was finding an example there.
Sorry to jump in. We've got quite a few questions, and Rob, I know you said you're happy to network with people after.
Yes.
Sorry to change the plan a little bit, but I'd be happy if you guys wanted to stay in this room. So I won't be able to stay because I've got to go and facilitate another session. But if you're really enjoying and obviously having value from the conversation that you're having, please feel free to stay in here. I'm going to hop out now, but continue the conversation as much as it benefits you all.
Yeah, Hannah, just say thanks so much for all. You've been super welcoming from my perspective. I know everyone else has benefited from it as well. So thank you for all the work you're doing for the conference, and I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and thank you for joining us today and agreeing to speak with us.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. So I'll do my best to get through these questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen as well, because you don't need to see my big thank you. So, so Nikki, you said. In terms of, I feel that managers are gatekeepers. Yeah, I agree with that. Have you found it useful to get managers on board? Yes. So I absolutely. And I'd say that my general approach to this is with organizations, is to kind of say, let's test this. So rather than go big bang, let's kind of test this with some groups. And I often encourage organizations to find skeptics, endorsers, and people they don't know. So skeptics tend to be finance and IT. I don't know why, but that's the people that are kind of skeptics. The endorsers, or the people who think we get it, generally be from HR or kind of marketing, or that kind of maybe more proactive kind of discipline areas. And then there's some areas of the business we just don't know. So I tend to kind of say, let's test this out. And we run a workshop with job crafting, introduce it with these groups, and then ask them to come back a month later to see if they've to rate in terms of how they've got on, to see whether they found it valuable. And what we tend to find from that, or I have found so far, and this is my weaker answer to previously about when it doesn't apply, is that actually when you measure it, when you encourage people, you get really positive results. People say, no, I found this really useful. I've crafted my job in the same way. And then managers are part of that, or ideally part of it, or they can see it. They can see how you can share the stories of how people have crafted their job. So they can see actually it's not something that's a risk to them. It's actually going to be a benefit for them and their colleagues in terms of doing it, either because they're in the pilot, or if you've done the pilot, you can say actually 86% of people have applied job crafting in their job having found out about it, and 90% of people said this is a great idea that we want to share across the organization. You can then go to a manager and say, and these are some examples of how people in other areas of the business have crafted their job. So that's how that's one way I tend to do it. The other is around giving people examples of what happens when people job craft, in terms of some other context, and having those up my sleeve can be really helpful. And again, the evidence, and people are less persuaded by evidence, but the evidence suggests and shows that when you encourage people to job craft, they do it in positive, proactive, and pro-social ways. If what will happen is that people, if you don't let people job craft, they'll just be doing it anyway. People will be job craft anyway. They'll just be doing it in ways that serve them, and they'll do it in secret ways. So it's a case of why not do it in a way that actually serves everyone and openly, rather than doing it in a closed way. Does that answer your question? You can just nod if you've got a supplementary question, come back. And Juliet, you were asking about specifically around NHS trusts. I've just seen. So I've done work in related. So Connect Health did work for NHS, so they're kind of related as clinicians, but I haven't done direct work within the sector to encourage job crafting. There has been some research in the States, I think, in terms of the from the kind of healthcare sector, and it's been shown as an impact, but it's not something that I have directly done. And if you wanted to find those studies, I could probably dig them out, so you can drop me an email afterwards if you wanted as well.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I think the reason I ask is because I think sometimes the way, particularly with the clinicians and the doctors, the way their contract is, and the way their opportunities to job craft are very very difficult, and because they're nailed down into sort of job plans where basically between 9 and 1 you're doing this, between 1 and 5 you're doing this, it's this sort of thing. So and I think they would be far, and a lot of them, their well-being is impacted, and I think that a real big shift in that is needed, but it's more than just it would take a lot of experimentation. But I think that really is an area.
I think also one thing I'd say is
that
it takes energy to job craft. To do something different and change and new, and you'll know this takes energy. So if you've got a depleted staff group, and again, this picks up the well-being thing that we've talked about. It's not. I wouldn't necessarily be saying you should be doing job. It can help, but you need to have the energy and the space to do it. And if you're kind of haven't got that headspace at all, and you can't find it, it may not be supportive to you.
But also they can't see it, and also they can't see it. That's the thing. They can't see it as being advantage because it's.
Well, no, but I'll say one thing though. Just say one thing, and I'm very sympathetic to that. But one thing I would say, in terms of you saying we don't think that people can do, and I kind of felt this. But one example that I struck with in terms of the clinicians at Connect that did this, is that they were saying one of the examples that they did in terms of crafting their job was connecting with their colleagues. So they over lunchtime or beforehand they actually find a way to connect with their colleagues in a different way.
And that's critical, because a lot of the camaraderie has been taken out.
Yeah,
and that is critical. You hit the nail on the head.
So that was one, and the other one was just reminded me again of someone finding, I find people have ingenuity when they do this, is around if you encourage people to. Someone said that what they did was around being mindfulness. So they felt they're being frenetic from one patient to the next patient. So what they did is they counted their steps, and between one patient to the next, they took 20 mindful steps between one patient to the next patient when they're doing it, to center themselves, to control themselves, to be. And it was, again, came from them. It wasn't an idea that someone had forced upon them, but it was just a super smart way I could think about saying, I'm going to do what my existing tasks, I've got to see my patients, but I'm going to do it in a way that works for me, or change how I see and view my job. So I'll just say, Juliet, in terms of your thing, they're restricted, they can't do things. I still think you need to test it, but I think sometimes people can find.
Yeah, it's small, isn't it? Yeah, but no, I'd be interested in those links to the articles. Yeah,
I can try and do it. So if you email, the best thing for me, just email me or the contact details. We can. Yeah. I'll put my email on this at the end of the chat.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And then Gemma, I'm just seeing this for you. So how do you start the conversations with leaders to get them into the mindsets to try this? There's lots of different ways. Most of my clients to start with have been curious about looking at engagement perspectives. So they have an agenda about they've got high engagement, they want to keep it high, or they do more, or from a wellbeing perspective, they want to improve wellbeing, or from a Connect Health example, they wanted to kind of look at retention and attraction. They wanted to create a sticky workplace. So that's kind of, they've got a reason, a problem that they want to kind of help with, which helps. But I would genuinely say, if you care about the performance of your individuals, if you really want people to perform at their best, if that's in your interest as an organization to get people to perform at their best, then you can't ignore personalization from this. It's like, it'd be the equivalent of getting professional sports people and not allowing them to choose the equipment they're using and to personalize them, which they do, because again, they know that when people personalize the equipment they're using, they perform better. It's the same with the mindset at work. Is that, for me, a simple starting point is a performance conversation. And the question is, do you want to set people up to perform at the best? Does that matter to you as a business? And for some, it won't. They are happy for employees, depressingly, to be cogs in the machine. And in which case, if you have that mindset, I'm probably not going to, job crafting, it's going to be difficult for them to be excited about and to do. But if they generally do want people to perform at the best, then I think you can't ignore that personalization aspect. And if you then think about the wider context, as I did, lives, we recognize the benefits of personalization elsewhere. So why not the workplace? So that's my answer to that. So that's the answer to that. Sorry, Gemma, I hope that's helpful for you. And Samir, I'm just seeing you have your experience in working this in larger context, empowers teams and their needs and team balance, and getting teams to come up with their team solution. Yes, so I've done team crafting, so with some groups, say for example with HR teams, and I've done this in different sectors, so banking, but also not-for-profit, so kind of local government sectors as well, and getting people to think about actually how they can individually craft, but also how they can do it as a team basis as well. And so one example that sticks in my mind from an HR perspective was they were saying, actually, some people in their love and loathe activities were saying, I love doing casework, employee relations stuff. I love the kind of the problem solving involved. I love the kind of searching, the sleuthing involved in doing it. And there are other people there saying, I absolutely hate employee relations stuff. It just drains me of energy. It's something that I find really difficult. And it's something that everyone was expected to do. And so rather than what they'd done for equity reasons previously, when cases came in, they just made sure that everyone had an even base of these cases. And so the intention was good, but what they found from the job crafting is the idea of saying, well, why don't we actually allocate some of the core tasks based on people's strengths and preferences? So it wasn't saying that everyone still had to do some casework to make sure that they're kicking their professional experience up, but why not give it to the people who are really good at it, who are interested in it, rather than what we tend to do, give everyone the same things and treat everyone in the same way. So that's just an example. And I hope there's lots of different examples in teams. And again, at Google, Amy Wisniewski did some work with Google teams in a very different sector context, where they got people to kind of team craft and swap task swapping activities and things. So if you Google team crafting, you might find some stuff. There's some stuff I've written about it in the book, but if you're struggling, again, email me and I will. I can do what I can do to find out from this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, I don't think that's all the questions I've got so far, and I'm conscious and respectful of everyone's time. Can I just say thank you for everyone's engagement? I will put my email address in, but probably LinkedIn is like a good, because we can connect with people as well to do that. But just contact me whoever you want to, really. If I can help in any way, then I'll be delighted to do so. Thanks for your engagement and interest, and I will speak to you. I was saying soon, at some point, hopefully in the future. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for sharing, Rob. Take care. Bye. Bye.